was 4 or 5 years after the Rivonia trial and the complete decimation of the Congress movement inside the country. And at the same time, you had, in the late 60s and early 70s, two things happening in the Durban area. One is the revival of the Natal Indian Congress by Mayor Ram Gobind and others. He's now late. And the second is Steve Biko, Bani Patiana, and others starting the Black Consciousness movement, which began to get young people of that time interested in political ideas and about the struggle, and to make some choices about the Freedom Charter or any other alternative that was facing us. But the reality at that time, as many would tell you, is that we also went to university on Salisbury Island. So you had to get onto a ferry every morning. I was a science student, so a ferry back as well every evening after you did your practicals in zoology or botany or whatever it was. And it was a campus run in a very Calvinistic style. You had to wear a tie, you had to have short hair, your pants have to be of the right length, you had to wear a coat. And if any one of them were problematic, you could be sent home, you could be sent into so-called detention. And so that was quite an oppressive climate in which to grow up politically. In 72...
How did you end up there? Oh, also, I can interject because this is just basically going to be your voice, not mine. How did you end up there then?
At the university?
Why that choice?
That was one of the few limited choices that you had at the time. For many years, black students, that's African Indian and colored students, didn't have many choices. You couldn't go to a so-called white university freely. And if you did, in Natal University, for example, they had a non-European section. Medical school was the only black entity that would train black doctors. I don't think there were any white students there at the time. So choice was limited. And career paths were limited as well. So I trained eventually as a pharmacist so that I could get a job quickly and earn an income. But 72 is when John Foster, the then Prime Minister, came to open the new campus as you would know it today at Durban Westfield, before it all became UKZN. And by then we, as students, were very politically conscious. We organized all sorts of protests, both on the campus and off the campus. It was in 72 as well that the university refused to give us a democratic SRC, Student Representative Council. Today we all take it for granted. But in those days, if you had to publish a newspaper, they would say, get the prior approval of the rector. If we wanted to invite you as a guest speaker, we had to get the prior approval of the rector. So we said, well, stuff your SRC, that's not the kind of SRC we want. And for the next 8 years, the campus had no SRC. Because we said, no democratic SRC, then no sports activity, no clubs and societies. And it was the generation where people like Abba Omar and Alf Karim became leaders of the SRC, and Basu Gaundan, Swami Gaundan's son, and Joe Pashla at the medical school and as the president of ASASO, that you got the first democratic SRC at that university.
And this is some of the activities during that time as a student. I know one of the interesting ones was the, I think within the 70s as well, a boycott of going for graduation. Right? I think that was really spearheaded by Paul David, and that was successful. Some activities like that you guys orchestrated to get the awareness across about oppression?
Yeah, well, it was taken for absolutely granted that we will not attend graduation, so we were many years later given a kind of special graduation ceremony and a series of certificates then. So that would be one. The other would be to organize off-campus political events. We would even organize those events under the guise of cultural shows. So today in a university you would have some kind of induction program. Well, we gave them political inductions outside at Phoenix Settlement, at Kaji Hall, and elsewhere, but we framed it as a cultural show, but within it was a lot of politics and political education so that people would be aware of what's going on. And by the 73-74 period, we began to draw young people into activities of the an Italian Congress, and then pretty soon thereafter into the underground of the ANC.
Tell me about that.
As well. So 74 was the time when the first batch of Robben Islanders came out in Durban, and amongst them was the late Justin Kuzwayo, Jacob Zuma, Sunny Singh. There was Kirsten Munsamy, Kirsten Dorsamy. Many years later, or a few years later, George Naika, who's also late now. But both the growth in the NIC slowly, the re-emergence of ANC literature in the country, literature from the Communist Party as well, and a greater internal awareness, plus the first strike of any consequence and size, the dock workers strike, which took place in Durban in 1973, which attracted students from white campuses who were progressive in the form of NUSAS. They created what are called wages commissions. So there are people like Halton Cheadle and others who, as young progressive activists from those campuses, who began to work with the trade union movement, or the beginnings of a trade union movement. The late Rick Turner, for example, who was assassinated later in the 70s, and others like Harold Nsana created the Institute for Industrial Education, which was committed to educating workers and shop stewards in both politics and in trade unionism as well. So you can see the post-72 period, a growing crescendo of activity of one kind or another, greater awareness. 1976 takes place, and that obviously shoots us in